You mentioned it's not like it's much different than a normal loan, only that there's a lot more negotiations, I guess, and there's more left to be figured out from the private parties.
And I think that's what makes it exciting too, and that's what gives you so many opportunities. My mind was blown like daily when I started working at American IRA. You can do what?
Welcome to Coach Carson TV. My name is Chad Carson. You can also call me Coach, and this is a channel all about investing in real estate, achieving financial independence, and doing more of what matters. If you're new here, be sure to hit that subscribe button and the little bell so you don't miss anything. And if you like this topic of self-directed IRA investing, be sure to hit the like button to help us spread the word to others on YouTube. In just a moment, I'm going to take you to an interview where I sit down with my friend Sean McKay from the company American IRA. And we're going to talk about the topic of how you invest with self-directed IRAs. Now, before we get started, I want to mention that whether you're somebody who has a retirement account and you're thinking about diversifying maybe away from stocks or other traditional investments into real estate or loans against real estate, or if you were just someone who has no retirement account, you're brand new, what I was when I first started investing, and you want to borrow money from other people who have self-directed IRA accounts, in either case, this is going to be a really useful interview. We dig into the basics of what are self-directed IRAs or 401ks, how you can invest them in real estate, should you invest them in rental properties, into loans, into other types of assets, and also what are the gotchas, the pitfalls, because there are some things you need to be careful of. So it's a non-sugar-coated conversation. Sean's one of the most knowledgeable people I know about this subject, and he's also a real estate investor. He's been a friend of mine for a long time, and I've helped coach he and his wife Heather on buying rental properties in Charlotte, North Carolina. They have a young family, 2 kids, and are really just living the life of a real estate investor and have rental properties themselves. But he also has a day job where he helps people set up self-directed IRAs. So he's a perfect combination of all of us who are in the rental business or the real estate investing business, but also want to branch out and understand more about how to use self-directed IRAs or 401ks. Let us go to the interview right now. I hope you enjoy it. Hey, Sean, welcome to the podcast. Great to have you here.
Thanks a lot, Chad. Good to be here, buddy.
I've been looking forward to this. Sean and I go way back, so I've told a little bit of your history, Sean, and how we got to know each other a little bit in the intro. But we've had a lot of fun, both me watching you and your wife Heather and your growth as real estate investors. That's been awesome, and then also just me learning from you on the side of what you do with self-directed IRAs. And so I want to, just so our audience can get to know you better, like I know you. I want you to start just maybe telling a little bit more of your story, specifically with real estate and what you do and what kind of investing you're interested in personally.
Yeah, absolutely. So, it's been great to kind of watch your development, obviously with your portfolio, and then, certainly with what you're doing with education as well. So it's been fun on my end as well. But yeah, as it pertains to my investing and my background with that, I've been really lucky. I've gotten to watch family members from a distance early on in life actually buy a few rental properties themselves. In a couple of instances, I participated kind of as a passive investor earlier on, where maybe I'd put a little bit of the down payment money in there. But for a number of years, it was really just kind of watching some close family members purchase rental properties as they worked their day jobs. So that was kind of always how I saw real estate investing. It wasn't so much of a full-time entrepreneurial concept. It was something more so for the most part that I thought you just did it on the side with your W-2 job, for example.
Right.
So, ultimately, I started reading the books. I started trying to become a little bit more educated on different strategies and how you can buy rental properties and stuff like that. And so when I was in kind of towards the end of college, I tried to be a little bit more transactional. I tried to get involved in doing short sales, and I know that's something you've had some success with. I did not have too much success with that. I was struggling mightily. This was around 2007, 2008, and I grew up in Florida. So, that wasn't an excuse, because frankly, there were a lot of people that were super successful with working different strategies, even during that kind of start to the '08 meltdown. But for me, I I just didn't have the skill set. I didn't have the full entrepreneurial knowledge to be able to kind of carry that through. So as I tell people, I kind of won the lotto. I got a lifeline. The owner of our company at American IRA, Jim Hitt, I actually knew him primarily as a real estate investor, and I wanted to learn how to beef up my skills as a real estate investor. And he said, why don't you move up to North Carolina? You come and work for my financial services business. It's around retirement accounts. And I thought, great, I'm in my mid-20s at this point. That's about the least exciting thing I can think to do for a day job. But it's been incredible, and I've learned so much about real estate and finance and what have you. But it was kind of a bumpy transition to kind of get my feet wet in real estate. Wrong strategies, wrong time, lack of experience. But since then, my wife and I, also thanks in large part to what you've done with your coaching, we've built a rental portfolio, and we've been pretty fortunate with that.
So just to summarize, so you were interested in real estate a long time. You had family members who were doing it, so you kind of watched them and dabbled in a little bit, and then you ultimately got a job that you could have a steady salary, and your wife did as well. And then y'all decided, all right, we're gonna just do a more traditional approach, which is what most people do. Yeah. Speaking of that, and you saved your money and you learned how to buy some rental properties. And so y'all, and I know more of your backstory, but y'all owned, you house hacked first. I remember that was the first deal you did. You moved into a duplex, and then you moved out of that duplex later on and kept that, and you've continued growing it. So you have a portfolio of rental properties that you're in the game, you're doing it now, and you still have the day job, but those have grown. And looking back on it, we're going to get into self-directed IRAs, and I have a lot of questions about that, but I'm just curious for you, looking back on that process of buying rental properties and learning it, like, what's your thought now, looking back 10 years or however long it's been now since you started doing it?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think a lot of us want to be those full-time real estate entrepreneurs. It sounds like it's a more exciting life, or you have more freedom. I think the great thing about this job at American IRA, getting to meet people like yourself and those full-time real estate entrepreneurs, is that you have to kind of know your strengths and weaknesses. And my wife is a chemical engineer by trade, so I'd like to think we're pretty methodical, and we try to make rational decisions and, kind of work A, B, C through different processes. And so I think that, for us, we realize, like you said, working solid day jobs, saving money, kind of that slower path to investing in real estate and kind of building a portfolio over time. That's, I think, kind of suited our personality. So, you could say I kind of went full circle. I went from an acknowledgement and an understanding from a distance that could be a nice way to invest in real estate. And then I tried my hand at kind of the transactional, shorter term deals. And, it wasn't the right time for me. I didn't have the right skills. So that just frankly didn't work out. And then kind of back to that traditional model of, trying to buy a handful of deals each year, and just kind of that slow plod of a lot of what you teach us.
Yeah, the building wealth one house at a time, making it big on little deals. Y'all done that to a T, I think. You've just been steady, and you keep moving, and you make progress. I want to just compliment you for that. I really am impressed by what y'all have done. I want to introduce another topic. So, like, just kind of flipping it on the other side, like when the story of how I came in contact with your company, American IRA, and I learned about self-directed IRAs. I was in sort of the opposite situation. I started my whole career as a real estate investor right after college. I did not have a W-2 job. I did not have a steady salary. I didn't have the ability to save as much money. I was flipping some houses. I was doing transactions, sometimes unsuccessfully, sometimes more often than not successfully. Mm-hmm. But I was just kind of scrapping by. But some of those early flips that I did, I couldn't go into a bank and consistently get loans. I could get one or two here and there from a local bank. And so I started learning. I don't remember where I first heard about it, but I heard about the fact that you could use more private money, or you could borrow money from individuals who had money. And for a lot of us, when we first hear that, we're like, there's people who will loan you money. Like, how does that work? Who is this? Who are these people? And one of the biggest aha moments for me ever was when I heard that there's trillions of dollars that people have in retirement accounts. And a lot of it's just sitting there, and a lot of it's in the stock market and traditional investments. But there's a good number of people, especially people in our circles of real estate investors, who wouldn't mind having part of their retirement portfolio, or maybe a big chunk of it, invested in real estate, alternative type investments in real estate and loans. And so that was an aha moment for me. I said, well, wait a minute, I need money for my flips and the houses I'm buying. There are people I probably know who have retirement accounts that they can loan me and they don't even realize it. And so I went to a mentor of mine, one of my first private lenders. He had originally done a deal with us and he had put up the down payment. We went to a local bank and we did a deal. I call that like a credit partner deal now, where he was our credit partner. He helped us get a loan at the bank and put up the down payment. But the second and third and fourth deals, instead of doing that, I said, hey, do you have any retirement account money? And he said, yeah, why? Like, what do you have an angle? What's the deal? And so I taught him essentially, and he's much more experienced in real estate than I was. He knew a lot more than I did, but I learned about this thing called self-directed IRAs. And I said, what if you loaned your IRA money to me and I paid you 10% interest? We use that money to buy the deal. We're going to make hopefully $20,000 or so when we flip the property. And if something happens, I always told my lenders, if I get run over by a bus, something happens, I know you trust me, but if something happens, you would get this property and you'll have to make sure you're comfortable with the property. And he said, yeah, that sounds great. I didn't realize I could do that. And that's the common theme I've got from a lot of people is I didn't realize I could do that. I didn't realize that I could do a self-directed IRA. So that was my introduction to it, but I don't want to assume there's a lot of people out there who might be in the same boat I was, in the same boat my mentor were, that they didn't know what it was. So maybe you could, because that's your expertise. And I know people ask you this a lot. Can you just explain the basics of what a self-directed IRA is?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think that it can be portrayed as complicated or confusing. You're using a new term of a self-directed retirement account, so it has to be a very different type of tool. And so for me, when I think about a self-directed IRA or 401k, there's kind of two distinguishing features. So the first one is, as the name indicates, this is a retirement account where you as the account holder are going to be making the decisions for your portfolio. Mm-hmm. So we are not advisors, nor is any other self-directed provider like us going to be in the business of picking investments for you to invest in. You are going to be probably leaning on fellow investors, and if it's real estate, maybe there's realtors, appraisers, a lot of different team members to lean on, but you are ultimately going to be pulling the trigger. So that's part one, is you are the decision maker. The second part is, a lot of times people will hear about the term self-directed, but it's with a provider like a Vanguard or a Schwab or a TD Ameritrade, where you can pick your own investments as long as they're securitized products. So they're stocks or bonds or mutual funds. And those are obviously great tools, but that's not really kind of the full gamut of what you can invest in, as you said, with your IRA or 401k. So really where we come into play and we're going to add the most value for clients is, as you said, with alternative assets. So the way the IRS code is written is it simply tells us we cannot buy collectibles and we cannot buy life insurance policies. It doesn't give you a list of, you can buy stocks, you can buy a house, you can buy precious, all these different things. It's got to be just simply reliance on understanding what you cannot invest in. So as you said, with our clients, at least a bulk of their portfolio is usually tied to alternative assets, such as purchasing a piece of real estate, investing in privately held companies, precious metals, things like that.
Got it. All right. So the key component, self-directed, I'm glad you explained that you're the decision maker. Ultimately, the responsibility is on you, but your company is essentially, I think the term is a custodian. Is that right? So you're a custodian of the paperwork, the forms, and so we're going to talk about what you can invest in, real estate, loans, things like that. But essentially your retirement account itself owns these assets. It invests in these assets. And so your job as the custodian is to handle the paperwork, is to handle the ownership documents, is to make sure that those are things that are done correctly and the documentation is done correctly. Is that accurate?
Yeah, exactly. So really the only thing that's changing is the asset class. So if you go to Vanguard, you can pick any type of index fund, mutual fund, stock, bond, etc. You're directing that in those different opportunities. With us, your IRA, as you said, your 401k, directly owns the asset, and typically it's going to be a different type of asset, but it's the same exact rules and regulations for your IRA or 401k. Same ability to make contributions, et cetera.
Okay, that was my next question. So, I think people are familiar with the concept of 401ks, with IRAs, with a Roth IRA. Are there those options? Are those accounts look pretty similar? Are they under the same kind of rules and regulations about how to set up an account, things like that, how much you can donate or contribute every year? Are those the same between like a Vanguard and an American IRA?
Yeah, exactly. So the contribution limits are identical with the IRAs. And really the only time where your retirement account is going to change forms is if you had a retirement plan that was set up by your employer. So maybe it was a 401k, a 403b, a thrift savings plan, something that your company set up for you. When typically you have to leave that company. You've been let go, you retire, you just move on to another opportunity. You then have that old, we'll call it 401k product.
Yep.
A lot of times those are pre-tax vehicles. So you have to roll that to another institution, and it's also going to be in a pre-tax vehicle like a traditional IRA, for example. So that's really the only time where your account's going to have to change forms, typically, if you self-direct it.
But people can do that without paying tax on it, without having to take the money out. It's just essentially, it's like the money's going from one company to another.
Exactly.
And then that allows you to do something different. So like you had a 401k with Vanguard at your old company. If you choose to put some of it into real estate or do something different, you then you connect those two companies, they talk to each other, and the money would go from one to another.
Yeah, exactly. And as you said, I mean, a lot of our clients don't have their entire IRA or 401k with us. A portion of it's with us. A portion of it might be with another provider or maybe an advisor that's going to be helping them with that part of their portfolio. So it's definitely not kind of like a all or nothing proposition.
Got it. Well, later on, I want you to go through like the mechanics of how this works, kind of step by step. But before we even get there, I would love to go over some examples, because we've mentioned like in passing, hey, you can invest in real estate, you can invest in loans, and there's a whole list of things. And let me go ahead and list a few of them that I think, you correct me if I'm missing any of these, but I know you can invest in real estate, like an income property or a house you want to flip. You can invest in a loan, which is a lot of what I've done in my self-directed IRA, where you loan money to another investor, for example, and make an interest rate with them. You can invest in tax liens, which are, when counties or cities have property taxes that are owed. There's sales in South Carolina. We've gone to a few sales and bought tax liens. What are some other ones I'm missing that you see some clients also investing in?
Yeah, absolutely. So I see a lot right now of syndication deals where you'll have kind of a lead investor that's either buying something as simple as a single family home, or maybe it's a 200 unit apartment complex, and they're raising money from a group of investors that are typically going to be more passive with the investment. And so it can be individuals that put money into those opportunities, or it could be retirement accounts, or certainly a mixture of those. And so that's a way to get into sometimes a much bigger deal than that investor might do just simply by themselves. So I see a lot of syndications, a lot of private equity as well. So, that could be the startup company, it could be something interesting like a tech company that you're a believer in. It might be the next Google. It might be, not the next Google.
Yeah.
But it could also be something as simple as just a landscaping company. You've got a friend in town that's starting a landscaping company. They're raising money for equipment. It's either going to be via a debt instrument, as you said, being a lender, or it could actually be ownership in that landscaping company or the restaurant, or, whatever the case may be.
That's pretty cool. Never thought about the local landscaping business.
That's right.
Owning a piece of that. That's really, that's kind of compelling. There's something I like about that.
Yeah.
They couldn't cut your grass though, right? They'd have to cut somebody else's grass.
That's right. Exactly. Yeah.
We'll get to that.
So many rules.
We'll get to some of the rules, but all right. So I think people are getting the picture. It could be in real estate related stuff. It could be even when you said equity, it could just be in companies. And a lot of these are, the common theme, it seems, is they're not your big public kind of, securitized is the term you used, your traditional investments in mutual funds, stocks, bonds. These are more, they call them alternative assets, local real estate, tax liens, or private companies, things like that. So let's give people an example. And I'm going to start with a loan, because that's the one that I first got to. And I think this will be helpful for those of you listening. who are either have your own money that you want to invest and loan to other people perhaps, or maybe you're like me, you're that entrepreneur who needs some money for your deals, like what I was when I first started, and you need to borrow money for your deals, and you need to go teach. You need to give a little mini seminar to some of your friends to teach them how to do this. So let's go through an example, Sean, and maybe you can help me out with some of the details here. But let's say let's say somebody's starting off, they're like me, Chad, when he was 23 years old, and I find a property, and I'm going to buy it, and I'm going to fix it up. And I just got a heck of a deal on this property. It's worth $200,000. I'm buying it for like $100,000, and it needs, let's say $30,000 in repairs. Mm-hmm. All right. I don't have $130,000. I might have, let's say I have $30,000 on my own, and I go to a friend of mine, and this is not a family member. This is not somebody who, is my dad or somebody else. It's just a friend I met at the local RIA group. And I walked up to them and said, hey, I have this deal. It's worth 200 fixed up. I have it under contract for 100. Would you loan me the money for $100,000? Walk me through some of the details of like how that might work, just mechanically of the actual real estate transaction. Like how would my lender who has an IRA be able to fit into that picture of that example?
Yeah, absolutely. So, again, the key is it's going to be a very similar transaction, whether it's inside or outside of the IRA or 401k for that lender. So, obviously you're going to come to terms with that lender. You're going to figure out what sort of interest rates are appropriate. American IRA or your provider isn't involved in that discussion, but ultimately that lender is going to communicate to us, to our office, okay, I'm going to lend $100,000, and these are some of the particulars of the deal. So we have basically an intake form where the client makes us aware of the general investment, in this case, a secured loan. So it's going to be secured by a property. And so ultimately, as is typically the case, that lender and the borrower, probably to some degree, are going to be in communication with an attorney that's going to do the closing. And that attorney is going to be drafting up the promissory note and either the mortgage or the deed of trust, depending upon the state you're investing in. And so ultimately, we're just simply another vendor in the transaction where, as you're aware, typically the the lender isn't signing as much documentation as the borrower is, but any sort of documents for that closing that need to be signed by that lender will be given to our office to sign on the direction on behalf of that lender client of ours. So we're always kind of fulfilling the paperwork requirements, and then certainly we're sending the money to closing so that IRA lender client of ours can fund that, for example, $100,000 loan.
Okay, I'm going to point out a few things that I thought were important that you brought up. The first is if a lot of people listening might not be familiar with a private transaction like what we're talking about. So I don't want to take that for granted. Most of us we think about a traditional loan where you go into a bank, you make an application for a loan, the bank says, yes, we approve you, we'll give you a loan. And then everything happens behind the scenes. The bank talks to the attorneys and all of that. The main difference here when you have a private loan, which is essentially what this is that you are having to do a lot of the negotiations up front. There's nothing set. There's not like this private lender might have an idea what they want, but it's all a negotiation between two individuals who say, the borrower, in my case, this was me, the young entrepreneur, who said, I need $100,000. That's what started this deal. I've got this good deal. And you go talk to this private lender, and the private lender is interested. They're like, yeah, if it's worth $200,000, I want to verify that number. I want to make sure everything's okay. But if it's worth 200 and I'm loaning 100, that's a good deal. I can do it. I can do that. That met the old rule that I talked about with my first mentor. If the entrepreneur got run over by a bus and something happened to me, that the lender would have the collateral. And that's the big benefit of investing in a loan secured by a piece of real estate, is that hopefully you're making a loan against a piece of real estate that has value to it. So my lender, in this case, this private individual who has a self-directed IRA that's going to loan me money, they say, yes, that sounds good. And let's say I offered them 10% interest. It could be 6%, it could be 12%, it could be 8%, but let's just say that I agreed to pay them 10% interest and they were happy with that. Mm-hmm. We would draw up the basic terms. We would have to hire an attorney to help us out with that. And that attorney then, so that the parties there are the entrepreneur, the borrower, this private individual who has an IRA, and then you, the custodian of the IRA, and then the closing, the title company, the attorney. All those parties are interacting together much in the same way you would with any other loan, right? I mean, you mentioned it's not like it's much different than a normal loan, only that there's a lot more negotiations, I guess. And there's more left to be figured out from the private parties.
Yeah, well, I think that's what makes it exciting too, and that's what gives you so many opportunities. My mind was blown like daily when I started working at American IRA. You can do what? Because like you said, for me it was I knew you could get a bank loan. I knew right before I got hired, I was made aware of things like hard money loans where, it's higher interest, et cetera. And that was my only understanding of how you could finance the purchase of a property. So as you said, the ability to negotiate and to make it work for all parties, and we see a lot of really creative structuring.
Mm-hmm.
It's really interesting what can be done.
Yeah, and I just want to emphasize the opportunity behind it as well, because this is not something I'm just talking about and this is an interesting idea. Like, this is the number one strategy I have used in my 18 years of career to buy real estate. Like, every single year we are using money from somebody else's IRA to buy a property. And we actually, even when we can go get bank loans, we are choosing to do this and work with individuals. And these individuals are happy with it too. Like that's one of the things I try to cry on from the top of the mountain about. Like, this is amazing, because the individual who has a retirement account, in my case, I have several of them, they are depending on me to make the monthly payments on my rental properties to support their retirement. Like, that's how they are living off this income stream that I'm paying. And my job is to have a property that's safe, that keeps them safe, that I collect rent every month, that I can pay the bills and pay them. And so it's a symbiotic relationship. It really is. It's one of those rare win-win scenarios where you can meet an individual 20 years ago, you can add value to that person, y'all can do a deal together, and 20 years later, you can still both be doing business together and be happy about it. I mean, it's really that kind of thing. But the thing we're talking about today, the mechanics of this and how it works and what the legal structure is, that's the gotcha. That you just got to get your head around it. But the opportunity is that. I mean, it's like an untapped source of money that you can go have a lot of control over, instead of having to be cut off from the bank. And then, hey, no, it's a recession right now. Coronavirus came. We're not going to loan you money. That's tough. Like, what if there's deals out there? What if you want to buy deals? Like in 2008-9, that's what happened to me. There's a ton of deals. So, I'm going off on my stump box here, just like promoting it. But I think it's that the reason I want to say that, and the reason I wanted you on the call, Sean, was because I feel like a lot of people don't realize this is an opportunity. And I think they're missing out on this big opportunity to have some sources of funds for their own deals, or maybe loan it themselves.
Yeah, no, it's incredibly well said. And, certainly, one of the many things I've learned from you is you can also make that kind of a hybrid scenario for you as well. So it could be a situation where you're raising this money from these retirement accounts to fund the acquisition of an investment for your portfolio. Maybe you're just going to personally buy it or buy it through your LLC. And the thought is that if you're buying, in your example, with a lot of equity, you can make that acquisition with somebody's IRA or 401k. And then with that much equity, you could typically in very short time turn around and actually get, if you desire, some sort of bank financing with that 20 or 30 year fixed money that's so cheap these days. So there's a lot of different ways to get what you need to out of it. Because certainly for a lot of us, we only have a limited amount of money for down payments. And so if we use that down payment to buy the house or the duplex, maybe we're out of the game for the next year or two trying to save up capital. Right. But you can do kind of they talk about no money down deals, and that's a way you can structure that for sure.
That's for people who are familiar with this in the bigger pockets world. It's really popular now, the Burr strategy, where you buy a property at a low price, you remodel it, you get it rented out, and then what you're talking about, you go back and refinance it. You pay off your private money, you pay off your short-term money with a longer-term mortgage. And if the key is buying it low, you got to buy that low price to make this work. But if you're a good deal finder, if you can go out and find those deals, which does happen, especially in recessions or kind of harder economic markets, then you can go back and refinance. And that's an awesome strategy to conserve your own capital and be able to keep growing.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. Well, all right. So we have one example. That's been my favorite example, is either borrowing money or loaning money. But I know there are other people who prefer to buy income properties. And so I'm curious about a couple things. Number one, are there people still doing that? Do people buy directly real estate? And then maybe you could give me an example of what that would look like, or, and we could talk through some details for everybody listening to understand what it would be like with an IRA owning a rental property.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I'd say it's probably split pretty evenly with our clients amongst being the lender on real estate deals versus the direct ownership of real estate, as you said, whether it's a rental property, maybe a fix and flip, or just kind of holding on to some land that they think might be in the path of progress there.
Mm-hmm.
So, for me, me, I'm not the sharpest crayon, or I'm not the sharpest crayon. I'm not the brightest crayon in the box. That goes to show you how sharp and bright I am. I'm not the brightest crayon in the box. So I'm always trying to simplify these procedures and these processes to think through different strategies, right? There's a lot of really creative thinkers, but for me, it's three potential acquisition strategies when your IRA or 401k is going to buy a property. So most commonly what I see is a client has enough cash to purchase that property and to also do the repairs and have enough in reserves to kind of carry that property through. So just a all cash deal. The second opportunity is when I see clients that will actually partner with other investors to do a deal. So the IRA or 401k doesn't have to be the sole owner of the property. It could be a 10% owner, a 70% owner, whatever it may be. And then other individuals or other retirement accounts can also own a portion of that deal, which is kind of a boiled down version of that syndication concept we talked about earlier, where a bunch of investors can get together for big deals. So partnering scenario is kind of that second thought. And then the third opportunity is when the IRA or 401k is actually going to borrow money itself to make an acquisition of a property. So it doesn't have all the cash, and so it needs to find some sort of financing. The key there, though, is it needs to be what's called non-recourse financing. So you cannot personally guarantee the debt it's basically going to be an asset-based loan. So it's a much tougher loan under normal circumstances to get.
All right, let's start with that one since we just mentioned it, and we'll go back to the cash offer as well. Mm-hmm. So most people are used to the concept. I buy $100,000 property, I go put $20,000 down, I get an $80,000 loan. And some people might be thinking, hey, I could, I don't have enough down payment money, but I do have $100,000 in my IRA. So why don't I just use the IRA money to get as the down payment, and then I'll go personally get a loan since I have good credit. Mm-hmm. Well, you're telling me that's not okay. Like that's not going to work, right?
That's tough. Yeah. So yeah, and that's frustrating. And to your point also, so there's loan products out there. So for me, you're going to have three ways to get that debt. You're either going to be able to get it from a private lender that's going to lend to your retirement account. And, as you said earlier, there's a lot of ways you can structure that to meet everybody's needs. There's the ability to go to an institution that's in the business of lending these non-recourse loans. Very few players out there that are actually in the business and close these loans. So you need to do a lot of upfront research if you're wanting to go that direction. Mm-hmm. Speak to those mortgage brokers, make sure that the types of properties and the debt to income and all this kind of stuff is going to fit into their box, because it's a smaller box than what we're used to as investors that get bank mortgages typically. Yeah. So that's going to be the toughest route by far. And then to me, my favorite route, which, again, I've learned from people like yourself, our owner, Jim Hitt, is the beautiful world of seller financing. And so there's definitely ways to structure those seller financing deals to your IRA or 401k and make that a non-recourse debt structure so that you kind of comply with that for the IRA and 401k's needs.
I love it. Yeah. The whole once you open up the creative world, it just like keeps going and going and going. There's seller financing, there's private lending. And obviously there's a lot of details. Like I think one of the challenges of anything like self-directed IRA investing or seller financing is you got to know some things you got to learn about the contracts and the paperwork, and there's some knowledge you got to have up front. But the point is, like, the takeaway I want to keep hammering home here is that when you only depend on traditional financing sources, or you only go the traditional route, you're also dependent completely on those for your entire business.
Yeah.
When you open up these other tools, and I just look at them like tools in a toolbox, it's not like a 30-year fixed financing loan from Fannie Mae is any better or worse than a self-directed IRA loan. They both have their pluses and minuses, but it opens up the possibility for not being limited with your options on where you want to loan your money, invest your money, or, what kind of deals you can invest in. So that's the benefit. But doing a deal like we just explained here, where you have a down payment and the IRA borrows money, there's some tax issues. I know there's something called what's the business?
UDFI,
Yeah,
unrelated debt finance income.
All right, yep. Unrelated debt financing. That's a mouthful for me as well. So you're going to have a CPA on your team. You're going to have to have probably maybe a tax attorney. So it's not like these things they are complicated. That's one of the challenges. Yeah. But complex transactions, if they make a lot of money, can also warrant paying people who know what they're doing to help you do it. So let's leave that one where it is. There are ways to use some leverage inside IRA. It's not the most typical way from my experience, but it's definitely possible. And there's a lot of benefits to that. Let's go skip to that first one you talked about. So somebody has $100,000 in their IRA and they find a property that they could buy for 70 and it needs 20,000 in work. They got plenty of money to set aside some money as a reserve. So they're just going to buy this rental property. So you see people doing that as well, where they just own the rental property directly.
Yeah, that's certainly the bulk of what we see on the direct ownership of real estate, where it's just a single owner, it's a cash deal. And, I think for me, as you said, Chad, just as investors, you and I have been really big fans of being the lenders for a variety of reasons. But I think the case that can be made for the direct ownership of real estate is that you're really making an analysis as to what makes you the most comfortable and what are the opportunity costs for other types of investments you can make. So if you're looking at just a very simple cash acquisition of a rental versus some sort of a mutual fund that you're not going to be able to sleep at night if it goes down 20% because you just don't understand the investment, then I definitely understand how someone is going to want to work towards that just very simple cash deal, because it's a tangible asset. It's something that they are probably going to be more comfortable with, understand, et cetera. So yeah, there's definitely a place for those things as well.
Yeah, I think in the financial industry and a lot of the FIRE movement as well, which I know both of us are kind of interested in, there's I don't want to call it a snobbiness, but there's like it's kind of like, hey, the stats show that index funds, and this is the way to go, and that's the only way to do it. And yeah, like I like index funds. I think low cost index funds are great, but the investment is personal, and there's so many different personalities, and there's so many different risks and tolerances. And there's also, you go back to the Warren Buffett rule of like, he always wants to invest in things that are simple and understandable. Like if he understands them and they're simple enough for him to get his head around, then he'll put his money there. And if they're not, they won't. And so that's a great argument for investing in real estate. I haven't been as big a fan of that because I've invested more in real estate outside my IRA, and then I make loans inside my IRA. But there's a lot, you can definitely make a case for that, saying, all right, you find this rental property that produces a 7% cash on cash return, and you pay all cash for it. And here you are every year getting a 7% return. I mean, ignore all the tax benefits and all that. This is just like real money. Like I put $100,000 in, I get 7,000 back. There you go. And somebody who's looking at the stock market might say, well, maybe I could make 7%, 8%, 10% there. I don't know. But here I have a house that's making 7% plus any appreciation. That might be just as good, And so that I think that's a reasonable thing to do. And that you made a good argument for it. Talk to me about the logistics of that. Because I think that's one thing that people, when you buy a house and you own it personally, it's pretty straightforward. There's a lot of things that happen, but what are some of the extra things that people need to be aware of owning a piece of real estate in an IRA and not owning it personally?
Yeah, so I think for me, we need to be perhaps a little bit more cautious with our reserves when we're making an investment where we're going to directly purchase a rental property. So as you said, let's say it's that $100,000 deal, that's the purchase, the closing costs, and even the rehab. We all have different risk tolerances, but we should certainly have perhaps even a little bit more cushion for that than we would have maybe even with our personal finances, just simply because the reality is we have those limitations each year for how much we can contribute to that IRA or that 401k. And so for accounts like Roth and traditionals, if you're under 50, it's $6,000 a year you can put into that account versus $7,000 if you're 50 and over. So, the HVAC goes out, you need a new roof, there's, some sort of big ticket item. Hopefully you have cushion in there to handle those sorts of things there.
Got it. So you couldn't let's say the roof goes out and it's a $7,000 bill. You only have $4,000 in your IRA account and you don't have any, like you couldn't go pay for 4,000 of it with your personal or with your IRA money. And then, hey, let me just front $3,000 for a little while with my personal checkbook. That wouldn't work. Right.
Right. Exactly. You and your IRA are what are considered disqualified persons or entities from each other. So those individuals have to be really careful about how they interact. So really in those situations, it's not that you can't deal with it, it just complicates your financial life. So if you need an extra few $1,000s and you've already made your contributions or you just don't have that capital to invest, then you're starting to think about, okay, do I need to bring in a partner to help me take care of this deal? Or do I need to go get some non-recourse debt? And so there are ways to handle it. But again, if you're looking for the most simple strategy and the cleanest strategy, you want to keep as much cushion as you can in those accounts.
So keep extra cash cushions. That's the takeaway I'm hearing for exactly. A rental property. So if you normally would keep a few $1,000, keep $10,000 or 15. And so you just need to account for that up front. So instead of, if you think the deal costs $70,000, you might need to put in $80,000 into the deal or $85,000 because of that extra cash cushion.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So there's a lot of details and I would love to go into that more, but let's get into, there's a couple more things that I think people will want to know. I want to wrap it up at the end talking about, like, if you like this idea, what are some of the next steps you would do, kind of step by step, but I don't want to sugarcoat it. Like, I've promoted it. I've said, this is a great idea. You should do this. Let's say the other side of things. There's always a pro and a con of everything. There's always some great things and some challenges. So let's talk about the challenges and some of the cons of investing with a self-directed IRA. And I have some ideas of my own, but I'd love for you, maybe just as somebody who knows the inside of this whole business, tell me some of what you think some of the challenges are that people should consider before they do it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think there's just the knowledge concept that we should all recognize and consider. I'll do a talk somewhere and apparently I'm not thorough enough with the pros and the cons, and they'll say, this is the greatest thing ever, and why doesn't everyone have these accounts? And I think the reality is because they are self-directed accounts. And if you're completely unfamiliar with real estate, for example, you've never studied an investment asset class, you've never had any interest in it, a self-directed account is not a good idea for you. If you want to work your job, you want to spend the rest of your time with your hobbies, your family, friends, etc., and you're not willing to put in that work that we've had to put into as investors to try to become competent in some strategy, it can be a nightmare. You can lose as much money as you can in the stock market, perhaps even more money. It's something where you really need to understand and study whatever that is you're investing in. So I think that's certainly something that probably isn't said enough, that you need to understand the asset. I think most specifically, to be quite frank, I see our real estate clients largely being successful with their investments, whether it's because they're people like yourself that are fully entrenched and they're kind of experts in their strategies, or it's people that just stay a little bit more vanilla. It's a cash deal. It's going to be a long-term rental. They have reserves. There's ups and downs, but largely it works out well. I think it's kind of similar to the stock market for those of us that are trying to hit home runs and we're investing in either very small companies or we're putting money into something just because we got a hot tip. A lot of times that can be problematic, right? And so I think the same thing happens in our industry where there's maybe a little bit of a lack of understanding or analysis with a private equity opportunity, for example. So you don't understand the product or the service that you're investing in. You're just wowed by, the fancy car that founder has, or, they're just so charismatic that you're like, boy, this guy's going to make it happen no matter what.
Right.
And so I think just a fundamental comfort level, like you said, Buffett, investing in what you understand is so, so critical. I think then just the other part of that is making sure that you have good team members around you to help you with kind of the understanding of the technicals of making sure that you're doing everything above board and staying compliant with your IRA and 401k.
Got it. That makes sense. And so the people who sounds like would be a good candidates for this have that desire to understand the asset. They already, they're studying it. They like it. They're knowledgeable about it. They're not afraid of doing some of that upfront, getting the ball rolling work that you always have to do. It's not passive up front. No investment's completely passive, especially when it's new to you.
Yeah.
It can be passive eventually, but if somebody is like super busy at work, they got lots of money, but they have very little time, they don't have enough time to learn this stuff, it's perfectly fine for them to invest in some index funds, right? I mean,
Yeah.
why mess?
And we both do as well. Yeah. So
Yeah.
it's not an all or nothing, right? You can always diversify. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's a time and a place. It might be a different time of your life where you're trying to diversify some of your money that's in traditional assets and you put it in some of this. So, I'm glad we're talking about this, because I never appreciate it when somebody's always giving one side of the argument and saying, this is the greatest thing since sliced bread, when like we all know there's situations and people who this is not good for. And so I like your caution and saying, hey, just think about this, make sure this is the right thing for you. Make sure you fit the profile of the person who did this. And I bet just seeing behind the scenes, I could totally see that there's the fancy, private partnership, and this person's always been successful. And the people who've come to me and that I have the red flags coming up the most are they don't have enough money in the first place. They have $50,000 left in their IRA and they're saying, it's too late. I'm too old right now. I need to invest this money. I need to turn that 50,000 into 500,000. That's the biggest warning sign ever, because there's no free lunch. There's no magic ticket that's going to get you from 50 to 500,000. If that's the case, you're taking enormous risk. I don't care what they're telling you. The people who are much smarter than us, who know a ton about investing, they invest in vanilla stuff too. Like they invest in the basics, the fundamentals, and there's just no shortcut to, you can get above average returns sometimes, but you need to understand the risk. I think that's the point you're making here.
Yeah. Well, and I just real quickly, I'll tell you, I am a huge proponent, obviously, of the service and the upside and everything that can happen. We've been fortunate. We've had good growth in our accounts. We've seen a lot of clients that have made a ton of money. But when you're making investments, as you said, and you're thinking about your return and not necessarily the fundamentals of the investment, I blew out a few years worth of IRA contributions on unsecured loans when I started this company, because I was so entranced with this huge rate of return that I was going to make, because this investor, he was going to use the money for marketing, for wholesale deals, et cetera, et cetera. And I blew tens of thousands of dollars that never came back to me, because I thought I'd make 100% return on my investment, and I never got my principal back. So these accounts can be incredibly useful. We see a lot of successes, but if all we're thinking about is, boy, if everything goes perfect, then I can make 40% on my money, or, whatever the case may be. I don't know if that's a full analysis of the investment itself.
Got it. Yep. Those lessons where you touch the fire and get burned, at least for me, like those are the ones I remember the most. I got to touch the fire. I don't know why I have to do that and get burned,
I heard you talking about that on the John Schaub podcast, where, we all have to touch it. Maybe we all end up with the same conclusion at some point, but yeah.
Fire won't be hot for me. No, that's just for everybody else.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
All right. Well, this is probably something we should have talked about a little earlier, but there's one other challenge I know that y'all get lots of questions about, and this is just making sure you stay within the IRS regulations. And so the federal regulations, because you mentioned earlier, there's no regulations saying you can't invest in real estate, you can't invest in a loan, but there are rules. And so can you talk to me a little bit about some of the key rules so that people who are interested in this can know what they're going to have to navigate, what they can learn more about, after they listen to this?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing to be aware of is the disqualified persons and entities. So we start with you as the account holder, your spouse, and your lineal family members, your upline and your downline. Your downline also includes their children. So your child's spouse, your grandchildren's spouse, etc. Those are individuals that cannot get any sort of benefit from an asset owned by your retirement account. They cannot provide services to an asset owned by your retirement account. So that is, they can't be the realtor on the transaction. They can't be the closing attorney. Those official agents that are adding value to your investment.
Property manager, is that included in there as well?
Yeah, so property managers, there is oddly enough a debate in our industry as to whether you can self-manage your IRA or 401k on property. I think what is hopefully clear to everyone and we can be in agreement on is that if you decide for your IRA or 401k to own a rental property and you're not going to have official third-party property management in place, you're just simply going to have tenants send the rent checks to your self-directed provider. Um, we do see clients that are advised by their professionals that that's an appropriate structure. But what I think we can all be in agreement on is if there are issues with the property, let's say you have to file an eviction on your tenant, that should not be done by a disqualified person such as you as the account holder, because you are officially representing that asset in a legal format. In North Carolina, at least, it's with magistrate's court. And so you should at that point certainly have a third party, such as an attorney or somebody that can handle those specific situations.
Got it. So would it be fair to say that the most conservative way to approach that, and I'm thinking if I owned a piece of rental property, I would, from the very beginning, want to have a property manager who always touches the money. Like I would never personally touch the money. The property manager would hold the security deposits. The property manager would pay for maintenance. And maybe I could put a $1,000 or $2,000 reserve fund with them in case they had to pay for maintenance repairs. Mm-hmm. Seems like that if you had a non-disqualified property manager who was not, it wasn't you, it wasn't your parent, it wasn't your kid, it wasn't, somebody like that, is that the most conservative way to do it? Is that the cleanest?
Most conservative, cleanest, as you said, they're controlling the monies. You can certainly hire the vendors. Let's say you have to do a rehab on the property. The property manager doesn't necessarily have to identify the roofer, et cetera. You can hire and fire. But ultimately, as you said, the signing of documents, the receiving and the sending of monies, that should ideally, as you said, the cleanest way would be for a third party. And it can be a full-blown property management company, or it can just be somebody who's a third party that's not related to you, et cetera, that can act as that property manager as well.
Okay. So we're still in this first main rule, which is, I'm not sure if this is the same as self-dealing, but it's like you yourself cannot do some of these things that we're talking about. And the people who are like you, are really close to you, your lineal descent. And also I think I've always remembered that's my business partner would be somebody who like I own a real estate business with, and he and I are partners. He couldn't be the one who I loaned the money to, or who managed or bought the property for me. Is that accurate as well?
Yeah, exactly. And so with that lineal line, as you said, there's a lot of people that are not a part of that group. So you might have siblings, cousins, aunts, uncles that you would say, okay, great, they can be the property manager, or they can provide the sweat equity, or whatever the case may be. And as you said, the caveat to that being someone that you do not have a significant business relationship with. So we'll have siblings that will have a construction company, then that means the construction company and that sibling now become a disqualified party and entity there.
You got to be really careful when even if you think it's not a disqualified person, you had a 50-50 rental property deal you did with your brother over here that you just kind of forgot about, or, like you're a business partner. You might not have an LLC that says that you're a business partner, but I think that those have been the biggest minefields I've seen in my own navigation of the self-directed IRA world, is that when you start investing locally, when you start investing with, people, you got to make sure. And that's the tricky part, is to find those people who aren't disqualified.
Yeah. And even just your IRA provider. So one of the challenges for me as an investor is I can't do business with our clients' retirement accounts. So we're talking about all these great tools to raise private money. If you're an American IRA client, your IRA or 401k could not lend me money as an employee of American IRA. And so as you said, you're really having to think through the particular deal, the pitfalls, and who all the players in that deal are to make sure that you're staying clean with it. So yeah, it's definitely thought needs to be put into these deals for sure.
All right. So we're on the IRS rules. There's this disqualified party. I think we've hit on that. There's obviously more to learn there. And your website, I'm going to give a link to your website in the end, has a lot of awesome this information, this regulation. If you want to look at the regulation code and know exactly where it is in the IRS, right, y'all have that. Is there anything else we need to know about in terms of rules, regulations from the federal government?
Yeah, so largely in kind of tying in with the disqualified person, so there's the services where those individuals can't provide those services, the sweat equity, being an agent for the property, et cetera. But then also making sure that when your IRA or 401k is buying a property, or selling a property or renting the property that's not dealing with any of those individuals as well. So a really common example will be, hey, my daughter is going to be attending Clemson this
Mm-hmm.
year. And
All right.
so I would love to buy the condo with my IRA. And then I would love for that IRA condo to rent to my daughter who's going to pay fair market rent. Let's say fair market rent is $1,000 a month. Everything's above board. Unfortunately, that's a problem because your daughter is a disqualified person from your IRA.
Who could people go to? So let's say somebody recognizes the pitfalls here and they say, I'm going to do this, but I'm a little bit nervous by all this. And I think rightfully so. Who do they go to when they set this account up to do some due diligence on a transaction? Or like, can they go to you? Can they ask you about that? Do they talk to an attorney? Like, who are the team member that helps them stay clear of some of these problems?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a great question. So to me, I kind of see it as there's this hierarchy of resources for clients. And so we're always trying to add as much value as we can to the discussion for our clients in terms of, the fundamental rules that we're discussing with disqualified persons, prohibited transactions, things like that. And so there's a fundamental discussion that we're happy to have with clients. We're always deferring to tax professionals and legal professionals. If your attorney is looking at a structure for a deal and they deem it to be compliant, everything's above board, and they're signing off on it, we're going to go along with that structure because they are a legal professional that can add that additional value to the conversation. I try to be as much of a resource, and I'm usually going to tell people I'll give you as much as I can, as much as we're kind of licensed to give. And then at a certain point, if it's a really complicated transaction where it's not clean enough for us to say this specific section of the IRS code states this or that, then at that point you really need to lean heavily on those professionals. So we do as much as we can, but we're, at the end of the day, we're a vendor and we're not that tax or legal professional.
But if somebody sets up an account with you, tomorrow, they could call somebody in your office up, or I'm not sure who you have kind of in that role, and just run some hypotheticals by and say like, all right, somebody's going to be buying a rental property. They're going to do this kind of scenario. I don't have that property yet, but y'all could at least educate them on the typical, like y'all know the rules really well and can help them, give them some resources that would help them understand that a little bit better.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a great client services team. They've been with us, some of those team members, for close to 10 years now. So they're really solid. And, Chad, as you know, like you can get really granular and you can get really complicated, but 99.999% of the deals that we see from clients are very straightforward in terms of the analysis as to whether it's a prohibited transaction or not. It's really only people like you that give us fits in terms of, so creative or so whatever. But, you're clean with your IRA or 401k deals. It's just that you have the capacity to do an advanced deal inside or outside of that retirement account. So I think that's where you're going to need those kind of national experts that are the attorneys and CPAs. And they're out there, but it's also possible your CPA or attorney's not going to be incredibly well versed in this either.
Yeah, I found that right when I had my very first deal with my mentor. I forgot to tell that part of the story, that I had this lunch conversation and he was, oh man, this is great. I'm going to do this. It's sitting in a CD right now, making 0.5%. And he went and talked to his CPA, and the CPA said, that's illegal. You can't do that. And he's like, what? It's illegal? What do you mean it's illegal? And here I was, the 24-year-old kid, or, saying this, I'm sorry, CPA, like, I'm not saying you're wrong, but I'm just saying, read this regulation.
Right.
And that's exactly the conversation I had. And that's the way it's going to go sometimes. And I've learned a lesson with that. I'm very respectful of attorneys and CPAs because they do their work and they are risk averse. And I get that. I'm glad they are, because that's why I hire them to tell me the worst case scenario and think through that. I've also found though that you're the captain of your ship and you got to know your own stuff, and you've got to, even if you don't know your stuff, you got to ask tough questions. And so that's what we had to do. We had to ask the tough questions. And I would, and I knew enough. I'd studied this very small slice of this strategy to ask some tough questions. And the tough questions got to let me go think about that. Let me ask my colleague. And that opened the door. There we go. Okay. Like that's all. I'm not asking you to say yes or no. I'm just asking you to research it and here.
Yeah.
This is where the resources come in. If you have some educational resources, if you can share a website, you can, have you talked to CPAs on the phone? Have you had these kind of conversations, Sean, when people are setting up accounts?
An investor that we both know, very sharp, very successful. We were friendly at this point, and he heard me do a webinar on a very specific topic about, the non-recourse loans. And there are some accounts that are going to be better served to do levered deals as opposed to other retirement accounts. And so long story short, he heard me speak on it. His CPA had advised him to use a different vehicle, which was going to cost him tens of thousands of dollars in taxes because of the complexity and the way it was structured. And so I remember having a very uncomfortable discussion with that client and the CPA before a RIA meeting, where the client basically sat us both down and said, "All right, guys, we're gonna figure this thing out." And I was like, "Oh, geez, I'm sorry, sir. I wasn't blatantly telling the client that you were giving them poor information. The client had actually just kind of tied together these concepts of what would be optimal." So yeah, we're not opposed to it. It certainly doesn't always win us a lot of fanfare with some of the professionals if we're kind of giving some interesting, just general techniques to consider. But yeah, we try and be as helpful as we can.
Good to know. All right. So you're going to be getting lots of calls now, Sean. Talk
Right.
to my CPA. They're on the line right now. Let's go.
Yeah, exactly.
we love CPAs. My father's a CPA. We have lots of people in the family. So we show love to all of our CPAs out there for sure.
Absolutely. And I love the stock world as well. My dad's an advisor. I'm not anti the stock market. I'm just a horrendous stock market investor. So I plug it into the index funds when I go that direction. And there's a place for everybody. And, we're just trying to add a little value in our lane here.
Absolutely. All right. Well, speaking of that, like I want to sort of go towards the end here, talking about, first of all, I want to reiterate some of the benefits. Like I just want to, because we've talked about examples with rental and loaning. I want to just wrap up, what this concept is and maybe just restate it in a way. And maybe could you restate, we've called it self-directed IRAs, but restate it in a way that includes some of these other accounts. Because I think that's something that's interesting. I've invested in my health savings account, for example, with y'all for over 12 years, I think it is now. And so maybe just kind of restate why, if you had to sell somebody on using their self-directed account in general, why would they do that? What's the benefit here?
Yeah, absolutely. So, obviously this is a specific discussion. You're an expert on real estate. And so this has been a real estate geared conversation. But I think ultimately, if we take a step back, our service is really just a platform to allow people to invest their IRAs, 401ks, as you said, Coverdales, health savings accounts, tax sheltered vehicles in just a wider array of investment options. So if you're comfortable and you feel like the path to success is index funds, great. There's a lot of great firms to use that service. If you're looking to do something that is a little bit offbeat, it's alternative assets, et cetera, then a firm like us just simply gives you the ability to invest in a really specific opportunity that you think is going to be the best way to invest that IRA or that 401k type vehicle. So we're not pro or anti any strategies or asset classes. We're just here to give you as the investor more options so that you can invest where you deem appropriate.
God, that's a good summary. And I just want to reiterate, like most of my podcast episodes, every one of them is educational. And I reached out to Sean because this is a topic that I've gotten a lot of questions about. And people are like, hey, what about the self-directed IRA thing? And they would hear in passing that I do this a lot. Like this is a key strategy for me. And I recognize that, I've really got to up my game here, and I'm missing the education piece to share with people how to do it. So this is, if you're okay with it, Sean, I don't want this to be the last conversation on this. I hope we can have some other follow-up conversations. Maybe we can share some case studies, some examples. But I'm a customer of American IRA. So I've been a customer with y'all for a long time. I do my own business there. I've brought my own private lenders to American IRA. That original mentor that we talked about, he has an account with them. And so this is something this concept I've been a fan of, and I do it myself. I have my own money there. And so that's why I'm trying to share it with other people. I think it's an interesting strategy for some people, not for everybody, for some people. And so what I want to explain to people is if they do think this is something they want to do, or if they're going to do what I did and they're going to go take another person and help them get it set up, let's talk through those next steps specifically with your company. And I'm going to, disclose up front that, if people go, I'm going to have a link to your company here. And if people sign up through you, I think it's the best thing for them to do. I also get y'all pay me a affiliate commission sometimes whenever that comes through. So I just want to be completely transparent about this, but this is a company that I feel 100% comfortable with. I've loved working with y'all, and I've reached out to y'all to talk about it. So I know some people are going to want to work with you. So let's talk about those next steps and say, I want to set up an account. I've got some money somewhere else. Let's talk through how they do that.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, certainly appreciate that, as you said, just allowing us to share the information. And so I think ultimately it's really prudent to have a discussion prior to thinking about filling out paperwork to open the account, right? As you said, this is kind of a very general discussion and everyone's situations are different. So I think it's always a great idea to be able to just kind of dig a little bit deeper into your situation as a potential client. And so certainly clients can reach us through our website, americanira.com. Our information is there in terms of reaching us via phone and email. Always please let us know if you're logging into our platform and you're signing up for e-guides or any of our educational concepts. Please let us know that you heard about us through Coach Carson. As Chad said, there is an affiliate arrangement and we want to make sure we're tracking and we understand where we get the business from. But ultimately, it's just a matter of having an initial discussion as to whether this is actually a good fit for you. Our owner says I'm the world's worst salesperson because I am so just very transparent and we're just trying to make sure that we're getting people that it's a good fit for them to use our service. So you're not going to call me and I'm not going to slam you with some, sales call. It's going to be, let's talk about your situation and how our service can meld into that reality. And then ultimately it's a matter of an application kit if you decide to move forward with it. And so for those of you that again, make us aware of the Coach Carson platform, then we'll actually waive, typically there's a $50 setup fee to open the account. And so we do waive that for a Coach Carson client that comes on board.
Oh, thank you. And one thing I've appreciated about you and Jim and really your whole team is that I feel like I don't know if y'all portray yourselves this way, but I tell people that you're kind of like the small bank of the IRA custodian world. Like, there's tons of people out there. You got the Vanguards, you got the Fidelities, you got other people who do what they do. But ultimately, when you go with something like this, you got to find a company who's legitimate first and foremost. They have their ducks in a row. When you have your cash there, is it FDIC insured in the bank? I know y'all do those kinds of things, right? But then you also just have to go with somebody you're comfortable with. And I'm a small banker. I have my money with a local bank that I can go in and see somebody and look them in the eye and say, I need to change this or do this. And I think that first step that you talked about of just having a conversation around it. This is your retirement money with a real person. I want to talk to this guy I heard in a podcast named Sean, I think that kind of relationship is how I do business with my real estate with, lenders and borrowers. And that's how I've done it with my retirement account as well. So anybody who's interested in that, that's a really important factor. And, there's people who can navigate you through the details. How do you do the paperwork? How do you do the application? That stuff is important as well. And you want to get that right. But there are people who do that hundreds of times a day, behind the scenes who can help you kind of with those steps.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, we have a great team and a lot of our senior team members have been with us for 8, 10 plus years. And so I think there's a lot of continuity and, it's nice to actually build relationships, right? I mean, nobody wants to be put on a conveyor belt and just kind of just be put into this big system and hopefully you get return phone calls and what have you. And so we're trying to focus as much as we can on, as you said, I love us being considered a local bank type of group. We want to know people. We want to have real relationships. And so I really appreciate that.
No problem. And so anybody who's interested, I'm going to have a link in the show notes of this podcast, or if you're watching on YouTube, you can look in the description. There'll be a link to it but just to say it out loud is coachcarson.com/American IRA. So just the name of the company, coachcarson.com/American IRA. And when you go there on that landing page, I asked them to put something together, just sort of a kind of introductory video and content about how it works, and you can download that and get some information for free about their company and about how it works. So check that out, and hope that'll be helpful for you. Sean, just as we close, do you have any final tips for people who are interested in investing their retirement account in general? Like any other thoughts that we didn't cover today?
Yeah, so, certainly I think we've had the discussion about just ultimately investing in what you're comfortable with, what you think makes sense for your portfolio. Oddly enough, though, I think the biggest challenges that I see with new clients coming on board is just this element of trying to time their opening of the accounts, their funding of the accounts, their exiting from investments that they're currently investing in. And so basically what I would encourage clients to at least consider is, as you said, certainly first and foremost, we have our conversations, we figure out if it's a good fit. And if you think that we're the right provider, this is the right type of service to assist you with your IRA or 401k, that's great. And then we start with opening the account and then at least partially funding the account. Because for those of you that are interested in real estate and you're going to be investing in that with your IRA or 401k, as you know, it's a matter of time sensitivity, being able to get a property under contract. You can't necessarily wait weeks and sometimes not even days in order to submit offers on properties. Yep. So you need to make sure that you at least get your account opened and at least partially funded so that you can start to move forward on something prior to having a deal. Because the client that says, hey, I heard you speak at an event 10 years ago or 6 years ago or whatever it is, and then they call me and they say, hey, I got a deal. I got to put the offer in today and we're starting from ground zero. They're just going to be really disappointed. Their account's not opened. It's not funded. They can't fill out that offer to purchase correctly. So you need to just kind of do a little bit of that upfront foundational work if this is the right fit for you. And then ultimately we can kind of fill it in from there.
Yeah, I like that recommendation, because even if you had $20,000 or $10,000 there, you'd have the account open, you'd have the name, you'd have it all ready to go. And then if you wanted to transfer another $80,000 later on, it's just a matter of your company contacting the other and just depositing the money or wiring it over. That's a really good tip. I think you've run into some reality of that before and have learned the hard way that you need to recommend that.
Yeah, and Jim's done a great job. What's also unique is a lot of our competitors, they're charging that annual fee as soon as the account is opened. And so for our IRAs, your annual fee doesn't kick in until you make your first investment. So it's kind of an easy way to get involved and not feel as though you're going to get feed to death and you're just losing value of your account. Yeah. And we do also have those securities type of arrangements so that you can bring money over, you can get into index funds or mutual funds or stocks while you're waiting for that real estate deal, if you think that that's kind of the best use of your capital. Yep. Or you can just simply have it in a cash account. So there's more flexibility, I think, than sometimes clients are aware of when they open the account.
Love it. Yeah. Sean, really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for enlightening us about self-directed IRAs. I know people are going to be interested in this information, and I just want to thank you as well for all you're doing with your real estate and making me look good, going out there buying all these properties that you're doing now, and you and Heather are doing really awesome. So appreciate the good work you're doing and for sharing everything with our audience.
No, I appreciate it. You've, as you know, you've been a great friend, a great mentor over the years, and we've learned a tremendous amount from you. And you've also had some students that have really scaled up and they bought hundreds of units and done some impressive things. And we're just kind of that plodding family, but it's been a lot of fun, and it's been a really cool journey. And again, just kind of back to being able to have relationships with people over time is really kind of what it's all about. So I'm very appreciative and humbled by the opportunity to look as though I have something to say on a topic. So thank you for that. And any way I can be of help to anyone listening, definitely feel free to reach out. We'll put my email on the notes for the podcast and a good phone number for me. So just Great. Love to be a resource.
Thank you for that. I really appreciate it. Hope you have a great day, and talk to you soon.
You too. Thanks a lot, Chad. Appreciate it.
All right. Bye. I hope you enjoyed that interview with Sean McKay from American IRA. I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. Have you used a self-directed IRA or 401k for your own real estate investing? Or have you borrowed money from somebody else who has an IRA? Or is it something you're looking to do? If you have any questions, you have any comments, I'd sure love to hear from you in the comments below. If you like topics like this, practical subjects around real estate investing, financial independence, and doing more of what matters, be sure to hit the subscribe button and the little bell so you don't miss any of the videos that'll be coming out in the future. And if you'd like to stay in touch with me offline, off of YouTube, be sure to subscribe to my email newsletter. You can see a link below in the description. When you subscribe, I give you my free real estate investing toolkit, which includes practical tools like my deal worksheet that'll help you evaluate properties and have the formulas and the questions you need to ask when you're negotiating. I have a closing checklist that helps you when you're buying a property so you don't forget anything, and lots of other goodies that'll help you on your journey to financial independence. You can find the link to that real estate investing toolkit and my newsletter in the description below. Really appreciate you watching this video. My name is Chad Carson. You can always call me Coach, and this is a channel all about investing in real estate, achieving financial independence, and doing more of what matters. See you next time.